Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. President Trump is looking to undo President Obama's plan to tackle climate change. He's expected to sign an executive order today that rescinds more than a half dozen measures that boost domestic energy production in the form of fossil fuels. He will also initiate a review of the Clean Power Plan, which restricts greenhouse gas emissions at coal-fired power plants. With Obamacare's replacement now on the back burner, President Trump and congressional Republicans plan to move forward on taxes. The president wants big cuts in taxes for corporations and all Americans. But will Congress agree? Gary Lane is on the story.
With the health care defeat, President Trump learned that building consensus even within his own party can be extremely difficult. Convincing Congress to pass meaningful tax reform may be just as hard. And after the health care loss, the White House may look across the aisle for some votes.
I think it's time for our folks to come together. And I also think it's time to potentially get a few moderate Democrats on board as well.
But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer suggests the president may need to become more like a Democrat.
He moved so far the hard right that it's virtually impossible for us to work with him. If he changes, he could have a different presidency.
But Trump is unlikely to change his conservative tendencies, at least when it comes to cutting taxes and moving the economy forward. The U.S. corporate tax rate is among the very highest in the world. The president says if the United States is to attract businesses from overseas, it must drop the rate down from 35% to 15%. America would become a country with one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. Trump says he also wants to lower the tax burden on American families. However, the exact rate may be up for negotiation.
I think that moving forward, the president's vision on lowering taxes for every American is what's going to unite not just the Republican Party, but I think some of those Democrats are going to come on board as well. If we can provide one of the biggest middle-class tax cuts in the history of this country, I think that's important.
Also part of the president's plan, a border tax on imports. He says that will even the playing field with other countries who haven't played fair on trade. It's designed to bring in more money to offset the loss of revenues to Washington from the tax cuts. But Congressman Mark Meadows, chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, predicts real tax reform with lower rates will generate more income and greater economic growth, which would help both businesses and consumers.
When we start to grow the economy at 4.1%, it actually not only increases wages, but it puts more money in Americans' pockets each and every day.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Leading Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee say Republican Devin Nunes needs to step down from the investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 election. After a source said Nunes had a secret meeting last week at the White House. He says in that meeting he was shown intelligence reports related to the president's claim about former President Obama wiretapping him.
What I've read bothers me, and I think it should bother the president himself and his team.
Nunes believes there may be evidence the Trump Tower was under surveillance. Canada's Natural Resource Minister says his government is happy the Keystone XL pipeline has finally been approved by the White House, but the battle to build the pipeline is not over just yet. Ben Kennedy is on this story.
The long-delayed Keystone XL pipeline is one step closer to reality after President Trump issued a permit to break ground.
TransCanada will finally be allowed to complete this long-overdue project with efficiency and with speed.
Friday's permit caps a year-long fight between environmental groups and energy industry advocates. But the battle could continue away from the White House and along the route. Oil will travel through 5 states. It is there that Native American tribes and even local landowners will continue to oppose the pipeline. The $8 billion project would carry oil from Canada to refineries along the Texas Gulf Coast. Some 800,000 barrels worth will travel through Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. If you do the math, that's roughly 1/5 of the oil Canada exports to the U.S.
This announcement is part of a new era of American energy policy that will lower costs for American families and very significantly reduce our dependence on foreign oil and create thousands of jobs right here in America. And I also would like to add, I think it's a lot safer to have pipelines than to use other forms of transportation.
Industry advocates say the pipeline would improve U.S. energy security and create new jobs.
This project will directly generate an estimated 16,100 jobs, according to the State Department, all without spending a dime of taxpayer money.
But opponents claim it would add to global warming and that the country needs cleaner sources of energy.
So the bottom line, Keystone finished. They're going to start construction when?
We got some work to do in Nebraska to get our permits there, so
Nebraska.
we're looking forward to working through
I'll call
that.
Nebraska.
Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
The American-Israel Public Affairs Committee Conference has drawn an impressive lineup of speakers in Washington for its crowd of some 18,000 people. Speaker Paul Ryan and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley spoke to the crowd this week, each reaffirming their commitment to repairing and strengthening the alliance between Israel and the United States.
These past 8 years, they've been tough. Our friendship has been tested. No single political spat or public disagreement can sever our historic alliance with Israel, but it can erode trust. And I think the actions of this past administration damaged this trust. And that is why I want to pledge to you right here and right now, so long as I am in this job as Speaker, we will meet our military assistance commitments to Israel and provide additional funding in times of crisis when she needs us. We will be there. We are there and we will be there for Israel.
The days of Israel bashing are over, but you're not going to take our #1 Democratic friend in the Middle East and beat up on them. So for anyone that says you can't get anything done at the UN, they need to know there's a new sheriff in town.
The conference concludes today with speeches from the Senate Majority and Minority Leaders Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. For decades, the term generation gap has been used to define how younger people see the world compared to their parents. Those differences range from culture to politics to relationships. And as we found, it also applies to Israel. Chris Mitchell takes a look at why one ministry is introducing millennial pastors to the land of the Bible.
In their first visit to Israel, these young pastors will get a special look at the country and its history.
We need to represent Israel in a fresh lens, in a new way, and cultivate that heart. And so that's why trips like this are really important.
Eagle's Wings founder Robert Stearns believes Israel is too often portrayed as a villain by media, the UN, and movements like BDS, which calls for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state.
And too often, in a narrow first glance look, Israel can be painted as the Goliath and the Palestinians as the David. And so it's really vital to come here and understand the realities on the ground.
Those realities include seeing an Israel beyond the headlines and other noise.
So many people in my generation are like, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm going to have to see it in order to really believe it. And so to come here, you see the truth. And you connect with people, you talk with people, and you really do find out what's actually going on here.
Some felt that as millennials motivated by social justice, they needed to hear the Jewish side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Taking the journey really of the Jewish people and being able to walk that with them, and then being able to now say, I stand with Israel. After seeing their journey, there's no other side to stand on, and you can't grasp that unless you're here.
Rabbi Penny Dunner, one of America's leading young rabbis, joined this group of evangelical pastors.
I think that they get it, and I think that the more that Jews realize that they have brothers and friends in the evangelical world, and particularly with the emerging generation of millennials, I think the greater the chances for the success of the state of Israel and for the coming of the Messiah.
Many felt it was time to make the trip to Israel.
I would challenge everyone to do whatever it is, whatever sacrifice they have to make, whatever they have to set aside to make this trip because it's life-changing.
For me, it's completely opened up my eyes to God's plan for this land, God's plan for the Jewish people, God's plan for Christians, and this partnership that started to come together it's history in the making.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, got a chip on your shoulder? Are you nursing a grudge? See why it could be making you sick. Did you know unforgiveness can make you sick? It is actually classified as a disease in medical books. Now, forgiveness therapy is being used to help treat diseases like cancer. Here's Lori Johnson.
Jane Valseca might not be here today if she hadn't learned to forgive. When she and her husband Eduardo were in Mexico, he was kidnapped and tortured while Jane negotiated his release. She describes the ordeal in her book, We Have Your Husband.
And I knew that the stress could be taking a huge toll on my immune system.
After 8 months, Eduardo was released, but now Jane had to fight for her life.
I was almost not surprised, yet still completely devastated to hear the words, "You have stage 4 breast cancer."
Jane prayed for healing, even though doctors gave her a death sentence.
I did collect more information, and in one of the books that I read about Cancer Treatment Centers of America. And I thought, wow, this sounds like a fantastic place.
Jane added forgiveness therapy to her cancer treatment with Dr. Michael Berry, a pastor and author of the book, The Forgiveness Project.
Harboring these negative emotions, this anger and hatred, creates a state of chronic anxiety. Chronic anxiety very predictably produces adrenaline and cortisol, which deplete the production of natural killer cells, which is your body's foot soldier in the fight against cancer.
Dr. Berry's research on cancer patients showed 61% had forgiveness issues, and more than half of those were severe, like Jane's. She was consumed with revenge against her husband's kidnappers. Forgiveness therapy begins with putting to rest 3 myths. Forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation. It doesn't mean you condone the bad behavior, and it does not stop the pursuit of justice. Jane's path to forgiveness included writing a letter to her enemies, praying for them, and amazingly, finding empathy for them.
I saw the kidnappers as babies, and I took them one by one forward in time in an imaginary scenario that I had created, going through things that I thought that they could probably have gone through in order to get to where they got to do the things that they do and to do what they did to me and to my family. And it was then that I immediately felt this huge sense of relief. It was as if this huge ton of bricks, this weight of the world, was instantly lifted from my shoulders.
When a person forgives from the heart, which of course is the gold standard that we use in Matthew 18, forgiveness from the heart, we find that they're able to find a sense of peacefulness. Quite often our patients refer to that as a feeling of lightness. Lori, we don't realize what a burden anger and hatred is until we let it go.
In medical literature, unforgiveness is classified as a disease, which is defined as some process that overwhelms normal function. Cancer surgeon Dr. Stephen Sandiford puts it this way: unforgiveness makes people sick and keeps them sick.
It's important to treat emotional wounds or disorders because they really can hinder someone's reactions to the treatments, even someone's willingness to pursue treatment.
In case you're wondering about Eduardo, well, he's always had a positive outlook.
I love life, I love my family, I love food, I love everything. So I really don't have time to think about these criminals too much. I don't want to take my time, whatever I have left to be in this beautiful planet, to think about negativity.
Eduardo, Jane, and Dr. Berry shared a stage with President Obama recently. They were honored at the Hispanic prayer breakfast for their living testimony of the power of forgiveness. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Muchas gracias.
There's so many people in the church that are just being attacked by this thing called fear.
Still ahead, we are sitting down with singer and songwriter Jason Baer. The worship leader shares his heart with us in Studio 5. Singer Jason Bear scored chart-topping hits as an independent recording artist, but he still battled stage fright. That fear is the inspiration for his new project, Fearless. I recently sat down with him for our weekly segment, Studio 5, One to Watch. We're joined now by Jason Bear, singer and songwriter. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
New album?
Yes.
Fearless.
Yes.
Why Fearless?
Because, to be honest, let me just start back at the beginning. For years, one of the biggest things that I have fought in my life and in my Christian walk was fear. There's so many people in the church that are just being attacked by this thing called fear. And it seems to be one of the biggest tools that the enemy is using to break us down, to hold us back, to keep us from achieving the things that God's called us to. And so I think the biggest message that I could bring right now to the body of Christ is, look, you can live fearless. Christ has already overcome.
Absolutely.
He's already been victorious, and he says you're victorious. And so I think that's kind of where it all came from, and I love sharing the message.
People will be surprised that you may have experienced fear, considering you were on a singing competition in 1993 at age 17, three-time Billboard Top 10 singer and songwriter as an independent artist.
Yes, independent.
How do you conquer fear and become that?
The funny thing is during all of that, stage fright has been one of my biggest things. I have always just shuddered at the thought of getting up in front of people and singing, thinking that people would critique me or think that I wasn't good enough or couldn't write well enough or whatever it may be. But that stage fright just seemed to keep surfacing, and I just would pray, God, help me find a way around this. Even with the accolades, even with the successes, you still fight through those things. None of that changes it.
Wow.
It's, you know, you can top the Billboard charts as many times as you want to, but that little thing down inside still makes you think, am I good enough? Can I really do this? But somehow we just keep pushing, we keep fighting, and we give it the best that we have. And I've realized that God called me, and if he called me, then he equipped me.
Absolutely.
And so that means he's going to give me what I need to do exactly what he's called me to do. And so we just keep pushing through, and by the grace of God, he helps us make the connections and get the music in the right places and the right hands at the right time so that we can have those successes. So.
One that I've been listening to from you, On This I Stand. Tell me about that song.
On This I Stand is kind of one of the token songs on this new record, Fearless, because it is the foundation for who we are as Christians and believers. And the one thing that we can go back to when fear tries to grip us and things try to overtake us is always remembering that God never changes. And no matter what you're facing, how big the mountain may seem, how difficult the situation is, God is never changing, and he's still bigger than that problem.
Do you have a favorite song?
Oh, goodness. I do. I have several favorite songs on this record.
What's the one today?
The first time ever I can say that. But I think today one of my favorite songs on this record is called Mighty Redeemer. And the reason being is because we make so many decisions in our life. We make mistakes, we fail, we get back up, we try again, we fail again. But through it all, we serve a God that paid the price, the ultimate price. He showed us what mercy was when he gave his life on the cross. And so he took everything, every decision we make, all the right, all the wrong, whatever it may be, all the good, bad, the ugly, and he redeems every bit of it for his good.
In the times it's a struggle to believe, grace feels like it's somewhere out of reach. When failures are all that can be seen, there's still a voice of truth whispering, you are loved, you are redeemed, you are righteous, you've been made clean. There is nothing that can change or pull apart what the great I am says you are.
My last question for you, as a songwriter, what's your process? How does it come to you?
Different ways. For the most part, sometimes it's something that inspires me, whether I see it in a movie or on a billboard somewhere, or just a thought that hits me while I'm driving down the road. And then somehow that melody and the chord progressions and the lyric just kind of all start forming. And then a lot of times it happens in co-writing sessions with people in Nashville or wherever, and we just sit in a room and all of a sudden this genius idea comes into the room, and we know it's God speaking.
That's right. Indeed it is. Fearless is available now. Now, for the latest in uplifting entertainment, be sure to check out my show, Studio 5. You can watch it by going to cbn.com/Studio 5. Stay with us. There's more of CBN NewsWatch straight ahead. It is time for your Tuesday Tweetable, and this is a message I pray will bless you and inspire you to share with others. Consider this. The windshield is larger than the rearview mirror for a reason. Look ahead and stop worrying about what's behind. No matter how great what behind you may be, there is always greater ahead of you. With that word, be sure to make this a terrific Tuesday. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow.